Do you think then, so that...
Oh, sorry, because once he called me. This is nice story. I was head coach Offenbach or I was sports director, it doesn't matter. And he was head coach in Mainz. And he called me, Ramon, I have a player for you. Okay. And he said, he's this and that, and he's good in this and this and this. And take him. And I said, Jürgen, okay, he's good in this and that and that and that. Why isn't he a player for you? And he said, I can tell you, because we want, this is very typical. He said, we want to be honest to our players and push him and push them. And the position, if there are two for one position, I can be honest. Three, I cannot be honest. He's not a doctor or whatever, or professor, but he's for the human beings has a special art, you say art or special kind of intelligence. He knows your soul, or feels your soul, or feel the soul of the players. Okay.
Jürgen was crying like a little child. I will never forget these tears.
1 year later in Braunschweig, we missed for one goal on the last day.
Because he's experienced these crushing defeats, he's incredibly good with dealing with defeats.
The progress was there, and it was clear to see that the club, the team, everybody personally was moving in the right direction.
We had tough periods, but you've just got to kind of ride them, keep working. I think there was enough signs that we were going in the right direction.
It made us realise that this is where we belong again. We're a European force again.
He cares about the journey, about the process, about the relationships, about the emotive pull that you have with the squad, with your fan base, with the city.
And a lot of people, when people talk about culture, it's normally about getting players out your club who don't buy into what you want to do, or are not, or a bad apple, or haven't, or not got the right sort of values that you want, really. And there was a few players early on, he got out straight away. Now, that doesn't mean they were bad people. They might just not be in his way of thinking or his way of doing things. And if a manager didn't have that sort of connection with the supporters early on, you'd get a few supporters like, what's he doing? Sort of questioning, but no one ever questioned Jürgen because he's got that sort of thing about him where everyone just buys into what he's doing.
He had demands that some couldn't keep to, whether it was technical demands, physical demands, mental demands. It was like, this is what's required to play for me. So you adapt, you get on with it, you do it, or you'll get left behind.
I think innovation is often bred out of necessity. And at Mainz, you couldn't afford to get transfers wrong because you had no money. So whoever came in, and whether that was 500,000 euros worth of a player or 2 million, which would be the absolute sort of max, had to work for this team in both senses of the word. And that forced both him and Heidel to do tremendous amount of due diligence.
Wir haben sehr früh gemerkt, wie wichtig der Charakter eines Spielers ist. Wir haben uns viele Gedanken gemacht, welche Charaktere brauchen wir in einer Mannschaft, mal losgelöst jetzt vom fußballerischen Talent. Denn wir haben in Mainz eines gemerkt, wir hatten sicherlich nie die besten Spieler, aber wir hatten oftmals die beste Mannschaft. Das heißt, wir haben aus weniger guten Spielern immer eine sehr, sehr gute Mannschaft gemacht. Und Teamgeist und Kameradschaft, das gehört einfach alles zusammen. Und Klopp hat sehr oft zu mir gesagt, wir nehmen lieber den, auch wenn er schlechter ist, aber das ist ein guter Typ, der bringt uns als Mannschaft weiter. Und das haben wir bis zum heutigen Tag eigentlich so weiterverfolgt.
I think that was important for him to find not just players, but personalities that would match. And maybe someone who would bring something that the others are missing. You don't have to be friends with everybody on the team, but you kind of should like to spend time with them, maybe even beside the pitch, not just on, because that helps when you have to, when you're struggling when the times get harder, that allowed him to work his magic and to have fun and to make everybody enjoy it, even though that only 11 can play and the other maybe 15 sit on the sideline or on the stands and have to watch. But they understand that they are part of the group.
Even those guys who only get a couple of games per season, they just run themselves ragged for him.
He was looking to sign me for the next year, so we met, and I just remember what a just completely normal, young, energetic guy that he was, and it wasn't like a lot of other coaches that I'd been around in terms of his just kind of relaxed way of being, especially in Germany, and his enthusiasm. And I think that's something that really stood out at that first initial meeting. A lot of things that he promised, you know, he kept his word as a coach.
Jeglicher Spieler, den er gekauft hat, es waren, glaube ich, ganz wenige dabei, die vielleicht nicht eingeschlagen sind, aber das war einer von uns und das hast du auch gemerkt. Also das beste Beispiel, den Jürgen geholt hat, Lukas Piszczek von Hertha BSC damals. Er war auf jeden Fall offensiv in Berlin und spielte auf der rechten Seite. Und er kam nach Dortmund und er wurde geswitcht zu einem Defender. So, und mittlerweile war es dann hinterher der beste Defender, den wir in the last 10 years oder 15 years wir hatten. Also unglaubliche Geschichte.
People always have this idea that you buy a player and then it's done. Oh, he's a good player, and you just sit back and watch him play. It doesn't work like that. You can still buy a good player and it doesn't work. So what is Jürgen Klopp doing on the training pitch? How does Jürgen Klopp make these players feel when they're going out to play for Liverpool? How does he inspire them? Who does he put them with? Does his way of working, his system, his training plan?
I've been very often in the locker room in Mainz and I heard very often, make some mistakes, be brave. And that's the same he learned from Christian Heidel and Wolfgang Frank. And this is his speech to all these players. And this is the reason all the players love him and develop very, very good.
We ran through walls for him, and that was his very least demand, was that you work and you run for him, for the team, which made me happy because I knew I could give that day in, day out, you know, every match day I could give that. And there's something about that makes you feel at ease as a player. You know, if you give your best, you know, the rest kind of will take care of itself.
That was his first success, that all these guys stayed in Mainz 6, 7, 8 years because of Jürgen.
Yeah, they wanted to fight for the club, they wanted to fight for Klopp, and they wanted to fight for themselves.
And this is what the people love. That was the reason the people came to the Bruchweg in the first month, 2,000, 3,000, and when they saved in the second division, 8,000, 10,000, 15,000. So the stadium was too small, and it's what was built up to 23,000 and sold out every match. That's unbelievable. I get here. I don't know what's the name when the hairs stay up. I remember, and this is my reaction. It's fantastic.
In the second season with Wolfgang Frank, they were fighting for promotion for the first time, but shortly before that he left the club, and then they had another time of fighting against relegation. And then obviously Jürgen Klopp became manager, and he kind of picked up the pieces and led them back to where they already were a couple of seasons before that.
Also das erste Mal waren wir 33 Spieltage auf einem Aufstiegsplatz.
We missed to rise up in the first division, and the last day of the season we missed for 1 point to get up.
Match day 34 against Union Berlin. Mainz had to play 1-1 or 2-2, and it would be Bundesliga, but they lost in the last 2 minutes this match, and Jürgen was crying like a little child. I will never forget these tears.
Für Klopp und auch für mich ist eine eine Welt komplett zusammengebrochen, weil das für Mainz ja sehr außergewöhnlich war. Und wir haben geglaubt, die Chance in der Art kommt unter Umständen so nicht mehr.
And the team came back the next day with the train. It was completely crowded, the whole station, full of our scarves, full of fans, and we went to the theater and the dome.
And they celebrate the team, because that was a team for the heart. They were disappointed. The supporters are always disappointed that if they miss. But then he takes a microphone.
You know, he stood there and it was almost, it had a preachery thing about him, but in the very best way, because everybody believed him when he said, this is the city, we are the guys and the gals, we are the people, we're gonna do it. We didn't do it then, but we're gonna do it then, and it's gonna be all right, and it's gonna be great, and we're all gonna be there to celebrate it together. And it's not about believing, it's like you're feeling it. You're feeling that it's gonna be all right, and that's what he did back then.
Most people would say, okay, forget it. We are down, no more chance. And Jürgen is the exactly opposite. He was the first one, he pushed the whole city in the hardest moment of the tears.
They believe in it. In the opening season training, there was more than 50,000 people who welcomed the new team. Because he said some weeks ago, you have to come in the first training and you have to be in the stadium and to support us. And they did it. And with this power, you can't lose.
Ja, die Ergebnisse haben ihm recht gegeben und auch der Mannschaft recht gegeben, aber wir waren halt im ersten Jahr nah dran und das hat auch gezeigt, dass wir uns verbessert haben, aber dass es nicht ausreichte, dass wir nochmal eine Schippe oben drauf packen. Es war unheimlich wichtig für Borussia Dortmund eben auch den wirtschaftlichen Aspekt eben zu haben. Es war für das Ansehen für Borussia Dortmund unglaublich wieder, nach vielen Jahren auch wieder international zu spielen. Im Vorfeld haben wir die Meisterschaft klar gemacht und ja, und das waren, glaube ich, die Momente, die den Verein dann auch wieder auf die richtige Bahn gebracht haben und man hat den Weg gesehen, dass es steil berg nach oben geht.
The development in his first year was already such a huge step that I don't think it would have mattered if we have missed it once again or so, because the progress was there and it was clear to see that the club, the team, everybody personally was moving in the right direction and really getting something out that hard work that we're putting in. But of course, being that short of having instant success really, but proving it the next year that it wasn't just coincidence, but it is a progress and we're on the right track, was probably helpful. We believed it was all done like after a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, but because he could tell us anything and we would just do that because we know, yeah, it's gonna work out. Don't look at the short outcome, but it will get there. So just do it. Let him talk, and we do it, and we'll see where we're going. And that was what we took from the first couple of months, really. And so wouldn't have mattered if we went shy for a second time.
That's another magic thing about Klopp, is that he's certainly helped bring that turnaround around because after going almost bankrupt, we all thought, God, this will be at least 10 years until we're going to play in Europe again. It was a lean period for a couple of years, but it wasn't as long as we thought. I think personally it wasn't as long. I think nobody at the club expected it to be so quick, you know.
I think there was enough signs that we were going in the right direction, and these things take time. And yeah, there were times in Jürgen's early era where we had, you know, a month maybe where it was, we had tough periods, but you've just got to kind of ride them, keep working, keep believing in in his way, in his philosophy, and that's what we done.
The Europa League final defeat was probably more difficult to navigate than the League Cup final defeat, because that was on penalties. It was Manchester City. They were a superior team. It was still early in his tenure. So moving down the line, you get to another final and you lose that as well. It was tougher because of the fact that it's now the second time, but scale of competition, circumstances, and I think how Jürgen dealt with that, where he forced everyone to still go to the party because the journey together was still worth celebrating. It was a chance for him to remind everyone to enjoy experiences, to pull together. There were members of staff saying, I did not want to be there. I did not want to be on the dance floor. I didn't really want anything to do with it. But you sit back and you think of those moments. That's when you needed to hear those things the most. That's when you needed the reminder.
He might have lost 2 finals, but at that time, it was better than what we'd been used to. So the club was moving forward, on the pitch was moving forward, and he was still work in progress, getting the people in that he wanted to get in. It was disappointing to lose the finals, but it was also a bit of people sitting saying, well, at least we're in the finals, we've not been there for a wee while. Let's keep going.
All the travel that mattered had actually happened in the run-up to the final, not in the final itself. We learned what we needed to learn from those other times. We had the great nights because of those other times. We reminded Europe that you don't mess with Liverpool those other times.
We knew we'd achieved something that year. We might not have known it then, but looking back, you learn so much from losing finals, and we made enough steps forward to know that we're progressing here. Okay, of course, you had to take a step back at times, you know, where we lost Hull away on a Saturday, I remember, but then we'd go and beat Spurs and beat Arsenal at home, and you'd hear the Anfield fans. There was something building. He was building something.
16-17 starts with that first game against Arsenal, the 4-3. Sadio Mane scores the incredible goal. And Liverpool, again, turn what should be a routine football match into an unbelievable event. And then the week after, we go to Burnley and we get beat 2-0. And it was amongst the lowest I've ever been coming out of any ground. And I remember going home and saying, I'm just worried, what if he can't do it? What if he can't do it? So we've had all these other people who've had a go, but what are we going to do if he can't? That said, what we then get to see through the 16-17 season is a ton of resilience from Liverpool, but also lots and lots of learning. This is a side that's still growing and still improving, and that believes in its own growth and improvement.
It was massive finishing top 4 that year. Especially not being in Europe the year before. You know, we weren't even in the Europa League, so we didn't even have the excuse of performing on Thursday nights. So it was huge, and that was the pressure that we all would have felt, which is probably why we weren't at our optimal. You know, there was pressure. So yeah, we grinded over the line that year. There's no other way to put it. I remember grinding away, and we got there.
Had we won the final in Basel, we'd have been in the big cup a year earlier. And sometimes life takes you on a journey where actually maybe you weren't quite as ready or whatever, but this team was ready to compete. There's no question about that. And it had a couple of issues in defence and in goal and things like that. And he was like, well, okay, I might have some issues, but we're going for this.
We had to play Hoffenheim, I think, in the qualification. So we had to qualify to get there, which is probably even better because there was less expectation. And when you have that formula, you can just kind of sneak your way and pounce.
It's probably the most fun I've had watching Liverpool because it felt like it came out of nothing.
I think it felt the first year of fully his team as well.
Yeah.
Van Dijk sort of comes in the January and sort of completes this is it, you know, he's got Mane and Salah both sides. The front three, it's the first year, the front three all together, and it's like, wow. Coutinho goes, and it's sort of that baggage, that sort of murmuring in the background of someone who doesn't want to be here, he's cleared that out. and that season just felt fun.
You know, you think back to the 5-0 against Porto, and suddenly Europe stands up and takes notice of this attacking football that they'd seen Dortmund do a few years before.
It was the kind of synergy between the fans. There was the players that Jürgen had really developed in the team. We had new additions really performing. We were putting markers down on City when no one really was doing it at the time.
You know, beating Man City 3-0 just didn't happen, and suddenly Liverpool were doing it. Being 5-0 up in a European Cup semi-final, it never happened when you read about European Cup semi-finals in the history books. You know, when we were hearing stories of, you know, Liverpool under Paisley, for instance, that just wasn't happening.
And the momentum and the confidence was just on a continual rise. That's what happens when you've got time. Time to build confidence, time to build belief, time to build his squad. And off the back of that, we had Kiev.
I'd never played out of the country. Never played out of the country. And here I was going to the Ukraine to play, like, you know what I mean, for a Liverpool Cup final. And what was overwhelming that day was, like, you know, I think a few of us were a bit like, we might get a couple of thousand. Do you know what I mean? It's Cup final day, everyone has their own traditions on Cup finals and their own routines. And, like, you know, we were expecting maybe a couple of thousand. I think the club were expecting about 500. Do you know what I mean? When you were looking at the plinth and you look at the stalls set up so close to the stage, and then what was overwhelming that day was like how quickly the park just filled up and the atmosphere, and then like obviously like I don't know how many people could even hear me because the sound system was what it was. It made us realise that like this is where we belong again. Do you know what I mean? It was like we belong here, we're a European force again, and like it made us all, this is how we do cup finals. We're Liverpool, do you know what I mean? We take over, and like it gives us the perfect opportunity to do that.
I mean, Shevchenko Park is one of the greatest moments in Liverpool's history, and it's not even related to a victory. And anyone who was at Shevchenko Park will be speaking about that for decades to come. And it doesn't even involve a trophy.
That was such a romantic journey. If things had been different, it would have been my favourite season ever had we won.
The thing about Jürgen Klopp is that he continually talks about belief, and it'd be very easy to, at the end of Kiev, say, that was our big chance, because you don't get the European Cup finals very often. Apparently under Jürgen Klopp you do.
One year later in Braunschweig, we missed for one goal on the last day of the season.
We won in Braunschweig, 4-1, and at the same time Eintracht Frankfurt, so very nearby, played. 4-3 Mainz was in the Bundesliga, 5-3 Mainz was in the Bundesliga, and it just was 10 seconds to go in the whole season.
6-3.
Frankfurt scored from 3-3 to 6-3 in 3 minutes in the last seconds.
Also das war genauso schlimm. Wir haben fest damit gerechnet, dass wir es diesmal schaffen und haben es leider nicht geschafft.
And they, with Mainz, came to a point where it was a miracle within touching distance, and then you get thwarted. And then maybe you think at that point, this is not meant to be. You know, how can I, after losing twice in the last day of the season and promotion, with a team that nobody feels have any right of being even in conversation for promotion in Bundesliga, how can I raise myself a third time? How can I do it?
And that could leave people frustrated, that could leave players frustrated, and it could keep the city frustrated. But the way Jürgen Klopp handled it changed the club really forever, because he had a special kind of fight and a special kind of fire in him.
Dann haben wir wieder die Mannschaft empfangen mit mehr als 10.000 Menschen und haben die Mannschaft begrüßt und haben praktisch Jürgen Klopp gesagt, Jürgen, du schaffst das. Er hat jetzt mit uns allen, hat er uns das Gefühl gegeben, wir haben es nur verschoben, den Aufstieg.
Sagt mir bitte eine Stadt, sagt mir eine Mannschaft, sagt mir irgendwelche Fans auf der Welt, die in der Lage wären, nach so einem Schmerz, wie wir letztes Jahr hatten, so eine Saison zu spielen wie die letzte. Nach diesem Schmerz, den wir gestern hatten, so eine Saison zu spielen wie die nächste. Es gibt keinen anderen Verein außer Mainz 05.
These defeats are the very best experience that Jürgen had ever, because this is the base for his success. He is in everything what he is doing. He remembers 2002 and 2003, and when all these people say, "Okay, it's over," Jürgen was the first one in whole Mainz. He said, "No, it's not over. In the next year, we will reach it." And I get it again. It was like an explosion. I've never seen anything like this. The most crazy party Mainz ever had. And Jürgen was God.
It was one of the best days of my whole life.
There were the celebrations in the city. And I told him we should stop going now, because it's never going to be as good as this.
I remember him saying, if we get the first goal, Anfield will do the rest.
It is the greatest night in Anfield history, and it wouldn't have happened without the crowd, and it wouldn't have happened without the players. But the person who brought all that together was Jürgen.